So one thing that I think we all share in common is that we sometimes look at a map of the world and we say, shit, I have no idea. I've never been in this whole region, right? We've all been in that place at some point in our lives where we haven't been in a certain region. We say, I got to go there. Well, that was for me, Africa. I had not even been on the continent ever, not even once. And so I said, but it's such a far away. I was from San Francisco, so it was like so far away. I'm just going to go there and see all that. And that red line represented roughly where I was going to go and roughly the sequence. Of course, nothing ever works. I bought this truck in Spain, in Madrid. It's a knockoff of, it's called Santana Nibal, which is a knockoff of a Land Rover. And I basically burnt the boat. In other words, I said, I'm not going to leave this continent until I've traveled to all 54 African countries and really get to know this continent very well. And so for me, crossing the Strait of Gibraltar was a symbolic way to just do a one-way trip until I got there. This is in Guinea-Bissau, just some of the terrain. I traveled across the DRC, lots of mud in the DRC. There's lots of sand, etc. Yeah. Now you wonder why this car didn't make it the whole way. It had some trouble. But it was truly monumental. I got to really know a lot of African mechanics. And they would always tell me, like, I'll have the car ready for you tomorrow. And of course, tomorrow, it's like next week, next month. Sometimes I had to wait for months for the car to be repaired. Eventually, I bought a different car, a Toyota Hilux in Benin. You can see a flat tire there. Anyway, the whole purpose of my journey was to see what I call the unseen Africa. What is that? Well, the Africa that we often see is either hell or heaven. In other words, we see beautiful safaris, National Geographic stuff, pyramids, exotic tribes, cool, amazing stuff. Or it's like war, pestilence, disease, AIDS, problems, Ebola, etc. We have these extremes. Well, 99% of Africans live in between those two extremes. It's neither paradise or hell. It's like this. This is a wedding in Gambia and just everyday life. That's what I want to kind of capture. And for example, in this wedding in Gambia, the groom wasn't even there. He was in Europe. But they still had a wedding. Without him. There was the bride, and she was all happy. The other thing is I want to climb to the tallest mountain of every African country. And you can see on the upper left-hand corner, there's a Drakensberg Traverse. On the right there is Malawi. On the left is the tallest mountain of the DRC and Uganda. It's called Margarita Peak. In the center there is South Africa's tallest peak, and then the bottom left is Kilimanjaro, which I hiked twice. Every time I thought it was interesting that I found that getting to the mountain was often the most perilous and difficult part of the journey. Sometimes the mountains themselves were not that technical. That's Niger on the right-hand side there, a really tough mountain to get to. Some of the stories were kind of fun. Per yesterday was talking about the communication and the art of communication. Here are some Gambians. I was at the tallest part of Gambia, and this is a little conversation. Let's put up the volume so everybody can hear. This is kind of communicating with people. They're Anglophone country, Gambia.
It doesn't really look like it, but we're on the tallest mound in Gambia. It's about 56 meters high, which is about 156 feet. And as you can see, it's pretty flat everywhere. I've asked these locals whether there's anything higher in the 5-kilometer radius around us, because that's what all the directions indications on Google Maps. And they've confirmed that, nope, this is about as high as it's going to be anywhere around here. So, believe it or not, this is the high point. Okay, and they didn't understand anything I'm saying, but that's okay. So I'm going to do now a handstand because I have to do it at the top of every, I think. So I'm going to go, I don't know how to communicate with this to them, is I'm going to go stand like this, and you're going to grab my feet. No, my feet. Okay. Hold on. Let me try this. Hold on. Ready? Ready? Okay, here we go. Good. This guy's great. See, that's so you can communicate even when you can't communicate.
So I picked up 3,000 hitchhikers along the way. I just wanted to have some company. I guess I'm lonely or something. But for me, it was to get some insight into the culture. One of the things I hate about driving in my own car is that I feel like I'm in a bubble. I love riding in public transportation and get to know the locals. I always talk to the locals next to me. And I said, I don't want to be cursed that way when I go to Africa. I want the Africa to come into my car. And so every day I would pick up hitchhikers, people who were just driving with babies. Walking with babies. I would see people who were just carrying a heavy load. I would stop, get them. Sometimes they would flag me down. I'd pick them up. They'd go onto the roof of my car. They would go onto the back of my car. Sometimes I had up to 12 people in my car. And a lot of people will say, isn't that dangerous? Didn't you have problems? I did have 2 minor problems, I might say in the Q&A, but effectively, I never had problems. And why is that? How many people believe in this room, and I'm sure everybody will raise their hand, but most of the people in the world are good? Yes, that's right. And so when you have 4 people in the car, one person's going to be a criminal, they're not going to rob you because the other 3 people are going to help defend you and they're not going to do anything wrong. So just there's safety in numbers. I just bring a lot of people on board. Nothing bad is going to happen to me because I believe that most of the people in the world are good, and that was certainly the case. That's one of the benefits. The other benefit was that when sunset came along, occasionally they would say, where are you staying? I'm like, I have no idea. I'll probably be camping. Well, come over to my house. And then voila, you have insight. You get to hang out with the multi-generational family. You get to hang out with the grandmother, the children, everybody. And you get to know African culture better than anybody else. And so that was yet another benefit. Going to checkpoints also was kind of smoother than in other cases, because when I got to a checkpoint, the police would say, oh, he's helping out other Africans. He's moving, helping them move around. That's great. And so they're a little bit more easy, less likely to ask for a bribe and that kind of stuff. This is in Djibouti. This is in Gabon. No, this is Cameroon and stuff like that. And one time I remember seeing in Cameroon, this happened to me often, the amount of, this is Gabon. Muddy. This little kid right here, he's so funny. He was just walking on the side of the road without anything in his hands, and I just said, hey, come on board, come on board. He couldn't speak any English or any of my languages, and he just came on. I thought he was going to ride a couple of kilometers. 20 kilometers he took. So it's like, he was going to walk 20 kilometers. He had no water. It was super hot during the day, and he was just like, very grateful for the ride. It's just amazing what's the distances that many Africans walk every single day. These are some ladies who had bags of rice and stuff like that they were happy to unload. And here's a story of these Cameroonian women. I saw them carrying an incredible amount of wood on their head. And I just had compassion. I just did this. You cannot imagine how heavy this is. It's incredibly heavy. And then they put this little thing on their head to ease the burden. Just a little pad. And with a baby on the back. And to me, it was just to brighten their day. Make their day a little bit easier. Take off a little burden off their shoulders. You cannot imagine how heavy that is. And she's doing it with a baby on her fucking back. It's incredible. God, this thing is heavy. So I saved them a couple of kilometers of walking. There's the baby. Yeah. Amazing. Just everyday life in Africa. And also, we talked a little bit about safety. A lot of times I thought it was interesting. I'd get to a checkpoint and they would say, hey, can we put one of our military people in here? He's got to go to the next checkpoint. I was like, sure, great, extra protection. So, sometimes they would ride alone. Sometimes they bring their weapons. Sometimes they even brought their mother. You can see this guy, he brought his mother in the back seat. And this is, the next guys are from Mauritania, right here. And if I'm picking up hitchhikers, the hitchhiker, if he's a bad guy, he's definitely not going to do anything when I got these guys in the car. This is Niger. Actually, I broke down in the middle of the Tenere Desert, and I got hitched about 300 miles. They dragged my car, 300 kilometers, sorry, and here once again. So great experiences as a wonderful way to get insight into everyday African culture, everyday African life, and that was one of the purposes of my journey, to really sink my teeth into this continent for 5 years. And eventually I would go back and spend another 3 years. And I really felt that I was trying to get the nuance of what's the difference between Guinea, Guinea-Bissau, and Equatorial Guinea, right? 3 countries. But how are they different? This is one of my more unusual passengers, a goat. Okay, so just to summarize that little story, is, the benefits to me is the cultural insights, of course, the safety that you get. Oh, I forgot to mention that they help dig, right? So if you get stuck in the mud or stuck in the sand, you got extra hands to help you get out of that point. And sometimes they even give you some tips. Some woman gave me a bag of peanuts as a thank you. So really a wonderful experience in having those 3,000 hitchhikers. Now rejoice. Rejoice is the name of the woman who would become my wife. I met lots of people in Africa, lots of women in Africa, and I used the Badu app, which is kind of like Tinder, and I met, when I was in Yaoundé, the capital of Cameroon, I met Rejoice. And I just thought, okay, just another person, whatever. But in the end, I really connected with her very well. Now, she has a fascinating story. She was an orphan at the age of 14. She grew up, she wasn't even sure where she was born, in what country she was born, but it was in like Boko Haram territory, so either northern Cameroon, Chad, or Nigeria, in Borno State. She escaped female genital mutilation. She ran to another country to escape from it. She was supposed to be married at the age of 12. She converted from Islam to become an apostate and became a Christian. She got threatened to death. I gave a whole TEDx talks. If you search for my Black Sheep TEDx talk, I talk a lot more about her. And her story is absolutely remarkable. And I said, hey, why don't we go for a romantic camping holiday? So there we were, there's our mosquito net, and this is what we would do. I drove her to the romantic destinations of Congo, Central African Republic, and Nigeria. And this is when we were driving across Nigeria. The guy on the far right is a police officer. I picked him up in Lagos, and we drove all across Nigeria, all the way to Cameroon, through southern Nigeria. And he facilitated, Nigeria's got a ton of checkpoints, and he facilitated all those journeys along the way. And Rejoice was just incredibly strong also, so I wanted to test her mettle, and so we went up to the tallest mountain of Cameroon, which is Mount Cameroon, I think. It's 4,100 meters, and she never really hiked at all in her life, but she got there before I did to the summit. Just an incredible, fierce, strong woman that really inspired me. And so eventually we would get married in Zambia, actually. That's another long story. Here she is on the top of Death Mountain, which is the tallest mountain of Nigeria. And she, again, got there sooner than me and met a shepherd at the top. And that was incredible as well. And the wonderful thing is I got insight into African culture through her lens, because she's an African, and she would go to 32 countries with me and get that visibility and get that understanding. The guy in blue is her brother. She hadn't seen him. Again, they were orphans. And so they hadn't seen each other for 10 years because he was stuck in Boko Haram territory. By the way, Rejoice lived with a suicide bomber who blew himself up right outside her house. So very different existence than most people. She grew up without electricity, running water, or anything like that. And so I reunited them. I managed to get him out of that territory so that they could finally have a reunion. Then we returned to Cameroon to then do the tallest mountain of Chad, which is also the tallest volcano. I know somebody in this crowd loves volcanoes. And anyway, that is the tallest mountain of the Sahara, as well as the tallest volcano. It's called Emi Koussi. So there it is. Emi Koussi is in the center of this map right there, 3,400. And that red little thing at the very top there, that's the tallest mountain of Libya. So we want to go to both of these places. This is in the Tbilisi Mountains. It's really in the middle of the Sahara. And so we had to get first to Emi Koussi and then go up to Bikku Bitti, which is up in Libya. And I'll tell those two stories next. Because they're fun stories. So this is the Emi Koussi from the sky, obviously, and it's a really remote place to get to. It's really in the middle of nowhere. You start out from N'Djamena, for example. It's going to take you about a week just to get anywhere near the mountain itself. Along the way, you just camp out in the middle of the Sahara. There I was with her brother, Mustafa, and I. This gives you an idea of some of the desolation that you face in the middle of the Sahara. Some of it's not all sand. Once you get to the Tbilisi Mountains, you get a lot of rock and things like that. But this is some soldier. I don't know why he's there. I can't even remember what this picture is about. But anyway, it's a nice picture. It shows you kind of the openness of the whole place. I tried to camouflage myself, but it really didn't work because I kind of stood out like a sore thumb. But it was a very incredible journey just to get there. We picked up this Muslim guy who was able to get us to the base of the mountain. And when we talked to the locals there, they said there's going to be water above the mountains and like in the higher reaches of the mountains. So we said, okay, great. So we won't have to load ourselves down. We'll only take maybe 15 liters of water, and we'll get some more water higher up in the mountain so we don't bring ourselves so much water. And guess what happened? No water. So this is the Muslim guy who guided us to the top of the mountain. He was one of the hitchhikers who took us there. It was quite useful. And then we started hiking up the mountain. Everything was going well. I thought, and Mustafa, by the way, had never been on a hill. I mean, he grew up in Boko Haram territory in Borno State, which is flat as a pancake. There's really not much there. So this was, he borrowed some of my hiking clothes, and we decided, at this point, Rejoice already had a fair amount of experience. She had already been to at least a dozen peaks, if not more, in Africa, so she had already been accustomed to it, but he had not. Anyway, so here we go. At one point, we had run out of water. We were running low on water. We only had about a liter left. So we saw down on the deep valley, there was some green, patches of green. So I said, okay, there might be water down there. Mustafa and I will go down to that valley. Rejoice, you save your energy. She hadn't drunk anything. It was around 2 p.m. in the afternoon, quite hot during the day. And I said, just keep walking to the base of the mountain, near the summit, and we'll just meet over there, I pointed. And so Mustafa and I went down to go look for water. It took us a couple of hours, and no water. Sucks. So we had to walk all the way back up and meet Rejoice at the meeting point, and she was not there. So I was like, shit. And at that point, Mustafa literally was on the ground like this, just completely collapsing. He says, I cannot go any further. He was just on the ground. He's just like, Francis, I'm too tired. I was like, okay, no problem. Just stay here. I'm going to GPS your coordinates, and I'm going to go to the summit by myself, and I'll come back in roughly an hour. Just stay here. Don't fucking move. And he said, okay. So I went up to the summit. Rejoice wasn't there. I thought she might be. Came back down. Mustafa wasn't there. So he apparently got ants in his pants, and he decided to go look for his sister. And so all of a sudden I yelled out, Mustafa, Mustafa, Mustafa. Rejoice, 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 rejoice. Zero. Nothing. Just, and all of a sudden the sun is setting. We've got about less than an hour of daylight left. I knew where the camp was, but I knew they did not know how to get back to the camp. It's not easy to get back to the camp. There's the satellite image, or kind of like a long-distance image of what it's like. This is a desolate place. There is no fucking water. There's nothing out there. And Rejoice and Mustafa were apart, sleeping by themselves. And I was going to the camp by myself. There was nobody there. I took 2 sleeping bags. I was shivering in 2 sleeping bags. That's how cold it gets at 3,000 meters in the Sahara Desert around March 1st. And I really panicked, but there was really nothing I could do. I had an SOS beacon, but it doesn't matter because I know that there's no way the Chadians will come in time to save them. And I knew the next day, none of us had water. I had just a tiny, tiny bit left. There was no way. I had to find them the next morning, assuming they even survived the night. And it turns out Mustafa had survived the night, and I went there, and I was terrified because I thought that I was going to lose both of them. And somehow, at around 8 in the morning, I found Mustafa, and around 9 in the morning, I found Rejoice. Whew! It was a very, very tough. I've been in bad situations, but at least it's me by myself. I don't have to worry about other people. These are GPS tracks. There you can see us at the summit, the GPS tracks, and this is our way off to Libya as we go there. And in some ways, you might say we're fucking stupid because what the hell are we thinking? To like go to Pico Bet, which is the tallest mountain in Libya, right on the Chad border? To be doing that after we nearly died? This is a much tougher mountain. The Libyan mountain is a lot harder than the one in Chad. What the hell are we thinking going up to Bikku Bitti? Well, we weren't thinking much. But I was thinking that, at least we learned our lesson. We were taking mountains seriously. Mustafa started to respect when I say, don't fucking move, I mean don't fucking move. So there, the number one, that's where the tallest mountain in Libya is. It's just on the other side of the border. And the way there is just incredible. I mean, this is all the visions you have of the desolation of the Sahara Desert. There's one place that's not even on the map, Turco. It's the last place where I could get some water. It's a little tiny oasis that's not even on the map. And I just had talked to locals and found out about it. I got about about 100 liters of diesel fuel, and I put about another 100 to 20 liters of water on the back of my truck. We would get stuck occasionally. Thank God Mustafa was there because he's so damn strong, and he would allow us to get unstuck. But we were by ourselves. And this is a time when Libya is under civil war, and we were crossing the border. We don't have a visa. We had nothing. We just went there and hoped that no authority would get us. Of course, we even hoped less that any kind of bandits or any people like that would come and assault us. Then we get to what I call the Al-Qaeda training camp. This is near the base of the mountain. And we see this barrier there. And I tell Mustafa, raise the barrier so we can go through, because that was the way to get to the tallest point. And I was quite nervous at this time. I was thinking to myself, this is a great hideout place for Al-Qaeda or, extremists to be hiding out in, but it's on the way to the tallest mountain. So we did meet one guy. We saw about 5 homes out there in the middle of nowhere, only one human being. And I told him, I just pointed to my eyes and I pointed to my car. I said, hey, look after my car. And he's like, okay, because we're going to be going on a 3-day journey to the tallest mountain on foot. And so we parked our car and we got ready. And this time I told Mustafa, stay near me. We brought this time 35 liters of water, quite a heavy load, and we decided off. And there you can kind of see the shepherd all the way out there, this little dot. And this is just we're leaving, and we're climbing up this little hill. It was quite hot during the day. This is the beginning of March, but cold at night. And classic Sahara temperature like that. And then after you go up and over this kind of rise and this hill, you descend down into this valley. And it's incredible. You feel so small. You've got these towering cliffs all around you, this incredible place where lush water used to pour through these rocks. You can see down here in the lower left-hand corner, just to give you a scale, this is Mustafa, just to give you an idea of how big this place feels like. And you're just there all by yourself. And it's just, there's nobody around you for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of kilometers, except for that shepherd guy. Really, you get a sense of just the isolation. And it's a very, very inhospitable environment. Just to give you a sense of it, there's a dead animal. This is an antelope dried up from the conditions. We camped relatively near this animal, and it was the last place that next time we'd have to climb up out of that canyon. We climbed out of that canyon, and the next morning, we got to this kind of plateau. This is the first of 2 plateaus, and Mustafa would never leave that far from me. He was always within eyesight of me. Then we would make these stacks of rocks, these cairns, in order to indicate where we had gone. Even though we had GPS, I was afraid that the GPS might fail, so I would just make a stack of rocks to kind of leave some breadcrumbs so that we could find our way back if we somehow got lost. Which, if we did get lost in that place, we're really complete goners. This is Rejoice's shoes. Long story, but you can see they're held together by duct tape. And her shoes were completely destroyed. A long story, we just never had a chance to buy her some good new shoes. And so there she was, hiking one of the hardest hikes in her life with duct-taped shoes. This gives you an idea of the water that would go through. It's incredible, the pools of water that used to flow through here. Now look at it, she's holding onto this sandstone, gripping onto the slippery surface. If she falls, she's not going to die, but she could easily break her ankle. And she would be completely screwed if that happened. So we'd have to be very tenuous. I always told people, be careful where you walk. Don't twist your ankle because we can really get fucked if we do that. We try to avoid as much as possible the sun, but of course sometimes you're just exposed. And one of us or 2 of us had umbrellas to help protect against that. There, again, there's another place near where we camped. This was near the end of the day. And another canyon as we're making our way up to the top. We knew that the very next day we'd wake up early and we'd finally catch sight of Bikku Bitti, the thing that we've been looking for. So we climbed up this final ridge and we got to the second plateau, and there it was. She's pointing to the summit of the tallest mountain of Libya, roughly 2,000 meters. Not that hard, not that hard. It's a simple walk up, but that's still a half day's journey just to get there. And so this was the morning and we are on our way. But here's the thing. That's so incredible. You look at this inhospitable desert landscape, and guess what? Just close your eyes and imagine that this was a verdant field full of animals, kind of like the Serengeti, just green and lush thousands and thousands of years ago. And how do I know that? Well, there's pictures to prove it. There's petroglyphs that we just ran into. I don't know how many Homo sapiens have actually seen these petroglyphs since they were made. But there they are. This rock art was made thousands and thousands of years ago. And it was just such a privilege and so lucky to actually just run into them. And you can see people with bows and arrows shooting these big beasts, these large creatures. And this was a completely different landscape thousands and thousands of years ago. And we were so blessed to be able to see this. And we just bumped into it. We had there's no guidebook. More people have been to the moon than been to the top of Bikku Bitti. And so there we do it. Finally, as around noon or so, maybe, I can't remember the exact time, we made our way, and this is the final stretch to the summit, just minutes away. And when we got to the summit, of course we celebrated. We were quite happy. But I reminded everybody, we're halfway there. remember, we got to get back down. During the whole journey, we had dropped water caches along the way. So we had dropped, a liter of water here, half a liter there, et cetera. And we had GPS located them, and we put them in places, and we needed to recover them. Because guess what? When we got to the top of the summit, guess how much water we had? 0. We had no water left. We didn't have to panic because I knew that we had just left a breadcrumb trail of water that we could just recover on the way back, but we had to find them. The good news is that we did find almost all the water caches on the way back. I think we missed one. And so there was about 19 caches of water, and we picked it up, and it felt great because we had light packs. We were going mostly downhill, and it was an incredible journey. There you have a 360-degree view of the summit of the tallest of Libya. You're probably never going to go there. I would love to go back. It was one of the most spectacular journeys I've ever done. It's certainly the hardest mountain in many ways to climb in Africa. But that really kind of, I think, taught Mustafa and Rejoice, but especially Mustafa, a certain amount of resilience. And it really changes your life when you go up these mountains that are hard. Whenever you push yourself to do hard things, it really can transform you in many ways. And to me, that was one of the blessings. Now, I'm going to share with you a couple of other mountains, and one of them will be a failure. I climbed 50 of the 54 African countries. There's 4 I didn't do. One was Tunisia, one was Eritrea, one was Djibouti, and the 4th one was Sudan. I'll get into that. But there you see the GPS waypoints from Emi Koussi all the way up to Libya. And then when we came back the other way, we took a slightly different way. And here we are coming in. This is the Libyan border. Everything north of here is Libya. The GPS points right up to Bikku Bitti. And we'll take in one more zoom-in picture here, and you'll see the actual trail, our footsteps. So those long stretches is where the car, and then we went on foot this way. It was about 3-day journey, and I can't remember, it was about 30 miles or about 40, 50 kilometers one way, something like that, maybe more. Anyway, so now we'll talk about South Sudan's tallest peak, which is 3,100 meters. This was back in 2017 or so, 16. Sudan was still under its civil war. There it is. But this picture is taken in Uganda. I was coming in from the Ugandan side because I couldn't get a visa. When I went to the ambassador, well, it was consul of South Sudan, he said, sorry, I can't give you a visa. I'm like, why not? He says, we're in civil war. There's too much danger. I don't want you to drive across Sudan. So I said, okay. So luckily, the tallest mountain of South Sudan is near the Ugandan border. So we went to this little village that's right next to the mountain. I met a priest who's very nice, and he said, okay, well, I think you just need to talk to the authorities. And I talked to the police quickly, and he said, yeah, no problem, go for it. So I said, great. So I said, let me get a guide up, because I was worried, because where do bad guys live during civil wars? In the mountains, right? And so this guy said, okay, I'll take you to the base, to the base of the mountain. He says, well, can't you take me a bit further, like closer to the summit or to the summit? So I said, no way in hell. And so that's where he stopped, right here. He said, like, good luck, from here on out, you guys go. I met one hermit a few hundred meters higher, and I talked to the hermit, and he's like, no, I don't want to go, it's too dangerous. I'm like, great. Locals don't want to go, and here we are, Rejoice and I, going across this landscape. And so our plan was, there's a lot more vegetation in the tallest mountains of South Sudan. The plan was, Rejoice would be ahead of me by a few meters, and if she bumped into somebody around the corner, I would take my backpack, which had a lot of valuables, and throw it into the bushes. So at least they would just steal her backpack, and there we are finally on the summit. We were quite nervous. We had to camp one night in this mountain, and finally we get to the top where the vegetation kind of dissipated, and we could celebrate. But once again, we knew that we were at the halfway point. We had to get back and not have any trouble on the way. The bandits and the people had created lots and lots of problems for the villagers. Sometimes every 2 weeks, the villagers would traverse the mountain as a group, like 50 of them, in order to sell goods in South Sudan, and they would sometimes get attacked by bandits. So it was a real deal, but luckily for us, we didn't see a soul. And again, you never know how close you are to brushing with death, or at least trouble. And we went back to the village, and that's when the priest said, well, the authorities want to talk to you. I was like, okay. So the priest took us to a police station, which was about 20 kilometers away, and they just wanted to find out all the details. But in the end, I hadn't violated any Ugandan laws. I had gone into South Sudan illegally. I didn't have a visa. But the authorities let me go. And that's the wonderful thing about Africa in general. If you have enough time and money, everything can be solved, and you can do anything. And they're just awful, very super flexible people. Okay, finally, this is the mountain that I failed. It's called Jebel Marra. I know there's a lady here who runs tours in Sudan, and I talked to her about this. It's a beautiful mountain from the sky. You can see. This is the tallest mountain. It has 2 wonderful lakes. This is a picture from Wikipedia, not from me. I was just so excited to see this beautiful mountain, 2 crater lakes. How perfect could that be? 3,100 meters or so. And unfortunately, it's in the middle of Darfur. So I entered from Abéché, which is in Chad. I went into the border, drove to the border of, and I got this nice written note by one of the ambassadors, or I think it was a consul, and he said, hand this to the authorities. They welcomed me. Here was the governor of of West Darfur, and he invited me to his house to stay. He fed me a lot of food with Rejoice and I. And guess what? Guess how many people were there to protect me? More than 10. At one point I had 8 vehicles, military vehicles, with 50 armed guys, military guys. That was at the peak. And they were escorting me through West, Central, South, East, and North Darfur. All over Darfur. We were crossing near Jebel Marra, and it was just crazy. I mean, during those situations, you don't know, should I feel safe or should I feel scared? What did these guys know that I don't know? They even have fucking rocket launchers, guys. Rocket launchers. I was like, what are they expecting? You'll see later a picture of that. But anyway, it was an incredible experience because here we would sit in a cafe and there's this huge machine gun in the background. We'd be, eating some food, pull aside on a cafe, and everybody would look at Rejoice and I, especially me because I was the white guy. It was just incredible that it was such a farcical scene. And unfortunately, they would not, despite all my begging and pleading, to let me up to the top of Jebel Marra. I'm like, dude, we've got 50 fucking guys with guns. What are they going to do? We can make it up to the top of the mountain. There's the rocket launchers. Look at that. Rocket launchers. I'm like, we can make it up to the top of the mountain together as a team. We can make it. But no, they didn't want to. So I got within 20 kilometers of that mountain. And the other 3 mountains that I had mentioned, the other 3 countries that I was not able to get up to the top of the tallest mountain, was the same thing, military reasons. There's military insecurity and things like that. There you see the tallest mountain. I'm pointing a red arrow to the tallest mountain on the topographical map. And you can see the blue are my GPS points as I get within 20 kilometers of the summit. And went through all these little small towns and villages along the way. Down in the south there is a town called, I think Nyala is the name of the town. It was kind of funny. We got there, and I would think that that's the most dangerous place to be because there would be a lot of people who could kidnap us or cause any trouble. But no, they let us have pizza just on the side of the road by ourselves. There was no armed protection or anything like that, and we stayed at a hotel. It was crazy. The Sudanese hospitality is the #1 country in maybe the world, but certainly in Africa. It was just incredible. This is one of the sergeants. They got stuck in the sand. We'd help them out. There was always a challenge going through Darfur. The hospitality was just remarkable. I remember when we got to Al-Fashir, which is in the north, I was almost out. They put me in a nice hotel. I was like, can we find a cheaper hotel? I said, this is like $90 a night. He said, don't worry, we'll pay for it. In fact, they paid for everything. In other words, the whole trip was funded by the Sudanese government, which made me feel very guilty because I was like, I didn't ask for this. I was willing to drive through Darfur alone, but they insisted that they had this, but they didn't charge me a dime. And that's just Sudanese hospitality for you to a T. So absolutely incredible. And these are my GPS points. You can go to a certain website, and I have it here in case you need it, that just shows you my GPS tracks all over the continent during those 5 years. So it was quite a life-changing journey, as you can imagine. I ended up spending another 3 years after that to do that. And so now I want to conclude with some of the takeaways, and then we'll do some Q&A. Okay? So to me, the #1 takeaway is to interact when you travel. One of the things, the problems I have with Europe is that they have so many fucking beautiful buildings that you don't want to talk to anybody. You just want to sit there and take pictures, and everything's so beautiful. Many other parts of the world, including Africa, they don't have as many of these architectural marvels. They do have some, or these natural marvels, but inevitably it forces you, or it should force you, to talk with the people. And that's why I picked up 3,000 Hitchhikers. That's why I want to interact with these people. Because when you think about it, that's some of your best travel stories and best travel memories. Think about it when you're meeting with some Italians, or you're meeting with some people from Mongolia or whatever, and you're talking with them on a day-to-day basis. It's because you interacted with them. And that's what I really, really encourage you to do, even if. And Per talked about that yesterday, about the beauty of language and of having that connection. Learning a few phrases in the language to establish that connection. That makes a huge, huge difference, and really is important to enriching your travel experience. That's number one. Number two, spontaneity. I think it's important to have a plan and have a structured plan, but not in Africa. Africa, there's an expression, TIA, this is Africa. Just deal with it. And the other one in West Africa, they call it Wawa. I got Wawa'd. What does Wawa mean? Wawa is West Africa wins again. And it has a wonderful way of thwarting all your wonderful plans. So don't make great plans. We talked a little bit about it, Per talked about it, like poli, just go with the flow. And that's the pace of the African continent in general. Things go a little bit smoother, so be spontaneous. Number two, push yourself. Push. Whatever your limits are, try as best as you can to go beyond it. Nobody in this room feels this way, but we all know people who are terrified just to go to a country that speaks a different language. You'll talk to Americans who are like, I went to England. It's their big accomplishment. And good for them. At least they stretch beyond their comfort zone. For them, that's beyond their comfort zone. For other people, it's going to a completely different foreign culture. But for other people, it might be going to Eritrea or whatever. But I really, really, really encourage you to push yourself. Push yourself linguistically, push yourself culturally. Eat foods, put shit in your mouth that you never would want to put in your mouth. Just really push yourself, because the diversity on this planet is shrinking. Many people have alluded to this before, is that travel is not nearly as exotic today in this century as it was 3-4 centuries ago. And so the way you can kind of get that feel of exoticness and difference and stimulate new neurons in your brain is to push yourself. And finally, be generous. You are a fucking ambassador. For a lot of places, let's say you're a black woman and you go to Russia, in Siberia, you're the only black person that person in Siberia has ever seen. So you are a fucking ambassador of all black people, whether you want to be or not. Same thing if you're a white person going to some little village in Africa or in East Asia or whatever that hasn't seen anybody. So you have to always be generous and give back. There's some people who are leeches and mooches, and I want to encourage people to do that, to give back as much as possible, so that people foster these bonds between different cultures, and that is what repairs relationships and prevents misunderstandings. So there you go. Those are the 4 lessons. I hope this journey has inspired you in some way or another, and I thank you so much for your time.
Please do not clap. Please do not clap.
Fuck you. I want the claps.
Hold on one second. Work with me, Francis. Work with me. Okay. We might have to do 2 claps. Unbelievably inspiring. I am making a commitment here today after listening to Francis. I am going to climb the 7 lowest peaks on every single continent, starting with Gambia. One picture here. Okay, I'm going to need your help in one moment, because I want to inspire Francis to inspire us. I would love to see one of these magnificent handstands right now. So let's get a round of applause to get this going. Per, can you help him with the feet? Get this photo going. Hold on. No, one more time. Don't hurt yourself. We need to do a photo. Oh, this is weird. Guys, remember this moment. Remember this. You're not going to see this at any other conference, I guarantee. Okay. I have interviewed so many awesome people. This conversation I had with Francis, I think 3 hours, stands out. Listen to his journey on my podcast. More importantly, go to his content, Facebook, Instagram, his blog, his books. He has a podcast. It is unique, unbelievable content. I want to see, let's get a couple questions going. Let's get the mics fired up. Okay, right here.
By the way, while we're waiting, this is my
Hold
podcast,
on.
WanderLearn. I really wander all over the place, and the social media is that.
Say your name, please, and where you're from.
Andy from Denver, Colorado. What were your navigational aids when you're on the, I mean, there's no all trails for Libya, I imagine. Like,
Oh, so how did I figure out how to get to the tallest mountain? Okay, fortunately, there was one other person who had been that mountain, and he had given me the GPS location of Turco, which is that one oasis that's off the map that has fuel and water. So that was super helpful, and then gave me the GPS location of the summit themselves. I had to figure out, luckily I have a lot of backpacking experience, a lot of mountaineering experience, so I kind of figured things out. That helped as well. But it was tricky. It was definitely very tricky to go there, and same thing with Libya. I think it's getting better. Sorry, same thing with Emi Koussi. I think it's getting better over time. I feel guilty because I should be sharing all my GPS location. Actually, you can put on that GPS. I have all my GPS. These are all my coordinates in Africa, and you can kind of follow my tracks in that sense. It's a certain website. Anyway, next question. Yes? Do you want, here, I'll do it.
Burton Flynn from Dubai. So what is the closest you came to dying? Like, what legitimate death? Like, what?
Uplifting.
Yeah, probably the closest I came to dying that I know of was when I was in I was in Cameroon, in Yaoundé, and it was 9 o'clock at night, and Rejoice and I were going to be taking a bus, and I really had to piss. And so I went down this alleyway, and it said, ne pas pisser, ne pas pisser. I was like, oh, fuck. And I went down a little bit more, ne pas pisser, ne pas pisser, shit. Ne pas pisser, ne pas pisser, ne pas pisser. And I just kept walking deeper and deeper down this alley like a fucking idiot, and just kept walking down to the alley. And then I finally relieved myself. And then on my way back, this guy said, hey, est-ce que tu veux pisser quelque part? J'ai dit, oh, non, merci, ça va. And I just kept walking. Few seconds after that, that same guy, and I didn't see the second guy. That's the weird thing. All I remember is that one guy who says, do you need to find a place to piss? And suddenly he came from behind and he started strangling me. He just put me in a lock. And I've never been strangled before. Anybody here been strangled? It's a weird thing because I know this sounds silly, but I never thought about it. You can't breathe and you can't talk. It's just a weird sensation to not, we're so used to breathing, right? It's just this thing. And like, I can't scream, I can't yell, I can't do anything. It's really a bizarre sensation to be strangled. And all of a sudden and then meanwhile, this guy that I hadn't seen, the second guy, he started going through my pockets. And I had my cell phone in my left-hand pocket and my wallet in my right hand, and I had my money belt with thousands of dollars and all my stuff. So I immediately got the wallet, but then I started protecting my cell phone. So I was in a position where I had to hold my cell phone with two of my hands because he was really using both of his hands to try to rip the cell phone out. And he eventually got it out of my pocket, but then I put the cell phone in between my legs. Meanwhile, this guy was choking me to death, and I couldn't breathe. And this is, seconds were going by, and I'm exerting a lot of energy, and I need oxygen to keep fighting. And I just kept holding the cell phone in between my legs. And finally, I did a monumental push to just, twist my way out of his grasp, just enough so I could scream. I yelled, and then fortunately within 10 seconds or something like that, 5-10 seconds, this guy, just one guy, showed up down the alleyway to check out what was going on. And immediately the two bandits fled with my wallet that had $10 in it and no ID. That's it. Because all my real money was in my money belt, my passport and all that stuff was in my money belt, and I still had my phone. But that was probably the closest I got to death. And in retrospect, of course, I was a fucking idiot for having fought him off. I mean, these guys could have easily had a knife. They could have, slit my throat. They could have cut me up. But fight or flight just takes over, and I decided to fight. And somehow I sort of kind of won. And these are two big guys, and they're young, strong boys, but somehow I managed out of that. Next question. Is some question there?
Hi, my name is Jim. I'm from USA. No offense here, but I'm wondering, given you had just met Rejoice and her brother not long before all this, and given the pictures and things, how was it that you kind of convinced them that what you were doing was not a little bit insane?
Yeah. Great question. No, it's not offensive at all. It's a legitimate question. And I certainly felt a tremendous guilt during Emi Koussi in that Chad Mountain when, especially for Mustafa. Rejoice I didn't feel as bad because I kind of eased her into it. I mean, like I mentioned at the beginning, the very first mountain we did was a 4,100 meter mountain, and she did that. We had a guide and all that kind of stuff, and so she had proven herself. By that time, when we got to those mountains in Libya and Chad, she had already done about 20 mountains or so, and those are tough. She had also walked across Madagascar with me, and so, that's a 4-month journey, 3,000 kilometers through a lot of, I called it Mudagaskar because there's so much mud in certain parts of Madagascar. So she was pretty hardened at that point and pretty tough, but Mustafa was not. And I thought, he's a young, strong guy in his early 20s. He should be able to do this, especially with it. Where I miscalculated is that I just didn't think he was going to leave me when I told him not to leave. But you're right, it was irresponsible on my part to take Mustafa in retrospect. But on the other hand, the flip side, they might say, well, we've lived with Boko Haram. We've lived, Mustafa was nearly killed by Boko Haram 4 times. He had bullets flying by him many times. Rejoice had some really close calls as well. So they grew up in a very, very tough environment. And so in some ways, they were more prepared than me in certain sense as far as dealing with dangerous situations. Yes, next question. Okay, the question was, how much time did I spend with bureaucracy? Bureaucracy was the worst thing about Africa. It's the borders, especially going overland. And there's several countries, about 5 countries at the time at least, that required you to get your visa from your home country. And that really complicates situations because I didn't want to leave the continent. And so that made, the bureaucracy is the worst part about Africa, just the tediousness of getting visas and things like that. It's certainly the worst. And there was quite a bit of that, especially at the border. Border crossings, especially when you have a car, it complicates things because they want to inspect the car, they want to check customs, all this other stuff. It would take me many hours for every single African border. Sometimes it took me 7 hours to cross a border. It was a real pain in the ass. Getting visas sometimes would take months to get a visa, and I would be stuck in a country, things like that. As far as the second question was... sick. Oh yeah, so I got malaria 6 times, and I got nearly died. Actually, Rejoice saved my life once. After we did Death Mountain, ironically, I had malaria on Death Mountain. I slept by myself on that mountain, and on the way down, I drove myself. Malaria is like a wave. It's not like most sicknesses where you kind of go down and then you kind of climb back up. Malaria, you go down, up, down, up, down, up, and that's how you feel. And I was on one of my upswings when I was driving myself out, but then I felt really bad. My fever was 41 degrees Celsius. At 43 degrees, most people die, and I was really bad, but somehow I got out of that. I also got malaria in Gabon, in Sao Tome. I got it in Cameroon. I got it in Nigeria. I got it in Ghana. So a lot of malaria, 6 times. But that was the only time. I mean, that's the only sickness that I got. Maybe I got diarrhea a couple times. I would drink the water in Niger a couple times. Any other questions? Extra positiveness in Africa. The first thing that popped in my mind was Sudan. I mean, Sudan, it's not to plug the person who's got the Sudan tours here, but Sudanese really stood out to me as being, it was the only place, in most places in Africa, Africans, they are poor, so I don't blame them, but they would often say, hey, can you pay for this? Can you do this? Can you, they always want something from me. But in Sudan, I could not pay for a meal or a coffee or a drink or something like that. They're just always like, no, I got this. It was and the level, and it goes beyond that, but so many different ways. The Sudanese really stood out to me in my experience in Africa as being extraordinary in that sense. And I think it's great because they have more pyramids than Egypt. It's a fantastic place. A lot of people here have been to Sudan. It's a magical place. Next question. Back there? Or here?
Me?
Yeah, go ahead.
Are you going to go back to Sudan to get Jebel Marra?
Yes, I want to go back to those 4 countries, Tunisia, Eritrea, Djibouti, and Sudan, to climb the tallest mountain. But right now, Jebel Marra is still closed, unfortunately.
I think I can hook you up.
You think you can get me up? Great, let's talk. Next question. So why didn't I take a stove when I did my round trip on the continent? So I walked from Mexico to Canada and back. That was 7 months without a stove. It's because of weight and time it takes to cook. I want to focus. I was hiking about 50 kilometers a day, or about 35 miles every single day, and I just wanted to just focus on eating and sleeping and brushing teeth. And I would brush teeth while I was walking. I would eat while I was walking. I was always walking from morning to night. I'd get up at 5 o'clock in the morning. I walked until about 8 or 9 o'clock at night. every single day, up and down mountains, up and down peaks all day long. I would go through snow in Colorado in the month of May is just covered in snow, 1,000 kilometers of snow. So I would just, cooking just slows you down. And so I just didn't want to be burdened with that, yeah.
So you've done a bunch of insane adventure, like, things like this. I'm sure you've thought of other things that you haven't done and you won't do, but like I'd love to hear some of the other ideas that you've considered.
Yeah, obviously the 14 peaks over 8,000 meters is one idea, but one of the more wacky ideas that I was seriously investigating was going to the North Pole in the middle of winter. So the North Pole, you don't know this, but the sun rises only once per year and sets only once per year. Some of you may not realize that. And I didn't know that. And so I wanted to leave around January and leave from Russia and then walk with a sled, dragging a sled full of, probably 200 kilos, maybe 100 to 200 kilos of food, dragging it across. You have to go over the leads, which are these little, jump in and out of the water. They have special suits for that. And just camp. It takes about, I think, 90 days to cross the entire thing. You get to the North Pole at sunrise, which is March 21st. So you start in January, you walk there, and then you celebrate the sunrise, and then you leave to Canada. That was one of my crazy. And so I even talked to NASA about this because I was like, how can you get these aerogel, which is a special gel that they use for the spacesuits? So I was like, if it insulates people in space, it's got to work for the North Pole. So I just thought about having a suit full of this aerogel so I wouldn't be freezing cold every day.
This is Charles, and this is awkward.
Okay.
I'm from the United States. Were any of the hitchhikers scared of you?
Yeah. Sometimes little African children, never seen a white guy, they would literally be running away from me. They would see my face and they're like, ah! So, yeah, there was that. But yeah, that was probably the only time. And by the way, a lot of people ask, have I ever been robbed? So Rejoice got a habit of putting her purse in the back seat. And so twice, these Africans, one in the DRC and one in Rwanda, they actually pilfered her purse. But each time we caught them. And one time I felt bad because it was a guy who had a limp. And he was my guide. And he was stealing from us. And so I took him. I felt guilty about doing this, but at the time I was fucking pissed. I just left him in the middle of nowhere. And I said, get out and give me my money back and leave. Goodbye. And I just left him. It's cruel, I know, but I was so fucking fed up.
Wawa. We're going to do one more quick question because this is so tough. Vasilis, I know you've been waiting.
Technical question. Land Rover or Toyota Hilux?
Toyota Hilux.
Thank you.
Easy. Of the 3,000 hitchhikers I stand up, yeah, which stood out as memorable? That's really, really hard to say. I can't think off the top of my head. I just thought about that little kid that I showed who was walking 20 kilometers. It's just, there's so many fun stories from that hitchhiking experience. That's why I'm writing a book called The Unseen Africa. Anyway, thank you so much.
Okay,
one more from...
Mike down there, please say your name and where you're from when this lovely lady, who's that, Shush, hands you the mic.
I guess I should have not given a presentation. I should just ask.
Hello. Yeah, George Serpa from Portugal and the U.S. Just one question, really, really quick. Did you have carnet de passage for the car, for the country?
Good question. So carnet de passage is something that only lasts for, I want to say a year, maybe 2 years. I don't know what it is, but it wasn't enough. So what I did is totally illegal. I bought this car in Spain. Luckily, they left me the Spain original plates, but they gave me these temporary green plates that had no country name, anything. It's just green with a bunch of numbers on it. So I thought, this doesn't look very convincing. So when I got to Morocco, actually, when I got to Morocco, I switched plates. I put the original Spanish plates, and I forged some new documents based on the original ones, and I used that because I knew that somebody in Gabon has no fucking idea what a registration document looks in Spain. He has no idea. He's never seen one in his life. So I would just say, yeah, this is my registration. And never, ever, ever was I caught throughout the entire continent going with that thing. Because the carnet de passage, to renew it, you have to go back to your country of origin, in this case Spain, just to renew your carnet de passage. And that would violate my rule of 4, which is don't go back home.
Awesome. One giant round of applause.